Plasticity and functional recovery. So this is particularly after a trauma to the brain. So what is plasticity? So plasticity is when the brain is relatively still malleable. It can create new neural pathways, it can alter existing ones as a result of experience. The brain can develop new connections, it strengthens frequently used ones, and some are deleted if they aren't used. So this process is called synaptic pruning. Now, Davis and et al. Found that experienced meditators, so Tibetan monks, produced more gamma brainwaves than student volunteers. So this suggested and implies that meditation caused a permanent change. Their brain had altered due to meditation, which supports the idea of plasticity. Also, the thought that there is a gradual decline with cognitive function with age, but even 60-year-olds still have brain plasticity, and this can increase their grey matter in the visual cortex when taught a new skill. But generally the thought is that younger brains, children, are more plastic. They are able to alter more than, say, older people. Functional recovery is the idea that following a brain trauma, healthy unaffected areas of the brain take over the lost functions, so the areas that have been damaged or destroyed. So other areas in the brain will take on those functions. So that process happens relatively quickly, so spontaneous recovery, but then it slows down, so rehabilitation therapy might be required. So that can happen. The quick process can happen by neural unmasking, so dominant synapses can be reactivated when they receive more neural input than before. Also, stem cells can be implanted in the brain to help treat the brain damaged area. So they can work in three ways. They can directly replace the damaged cells. They can cause a secreting growth factor that rescues the injured cells, or by forming a neural network linking the uninjured areas with the damaged brain region. So if we were to look at a question that's assessing your AO1, so Lotta worries about her grandmother's age and she will not be able to make any recovery. Using a knowledge of plasticity and functional recovery of brain after trauma, explain why Lotta might be wrong. So plasticity is that the brain is constantly adapting, altering, changing itself through synaptic pruning, so strengthening used networks, altering new unused ones, making new connections, deleting unused networks. Functional recovery is the idea that healthy, unaffected areas of the brain will take over or take on the processes of the damaged areas of the brain, and this still can happen even though she might be over the age of 60. Plasticity is still able to happen. Functional recovery could be spontaneous, so the process could be quite quick to begin with, but then it might slow down and she might require rehabilitation therapy in order to help recover full functioning of the damaged area. So in terms of evaluation then, so we have supporting evidence from Maguire. So he measured the grey matter in taxi drivers using MRI scanning techniques. And there's a positive correlation between the size of their posterior hippocampus and how long they had worked as a taxi driver. So that supports the idea that their brains had changed. They'd strengthened those used neural pathways, and therefore that had altered the size of their brain. So plasticity supports the idea of plasticity of the brain. So we've got some contradictory evidence that plasticity is only in young children, so it can continue with age. So golf training produced changes in neural representation of movement in participants aged 40 to 60. Other factors could be important in whether we do have functional recovery. So educational attainment could be an important factor. So when they looked at US traumatic brain injury database, they found that 40% of patients with a college level education achieved disability-free recovery, so they were able to have functional recovery, compared to only 10% who'd left school early. So functional recovery could be dependent on level of educational attainment. It's useful. So we've got two pieces of useful information, so real world applications. So stem cells have helped rats with traumatic brain injuries. In a controlled experiment, rats were given transplants of stem cells in their brain, and they developed more neuron-like cells in that area compared to control rats. So that supports the idea that stem cells can help with functional recovery. Also, we have some practical applications for people with strokes and the development of neurorehabilitation. So this demonstrates the importance of psychological research for society.